What's good? What's good, everybody? Make sure to like and subscribe as you come to the channel and check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to make it speak a little bit about Draymond Green and the statements that he made about Charles Barkley on the TNT show when he said that he didn't want to end up like Charles Barkley. Basically, that's what he was saying, right? And so, like, his statements just proved that he really don't know the history of basketball. He don't really have he don't really have any respect for like how good the previous generation, like Charles Barkley generation, like how great a basketball players that those guys were that played with Charles Barkley in that league. And that's even taken, like don't even talk about like Michael Jordan, like the guys who played in the league the same time with Michael Jordan. No, it was some great basketball players that played with Michael Jordan. And for Draymond Green to say that, he didn't want to end up like Charles Barkley, I just think that it just proves that number one, he has no history, right? He don't know anything about the history of the NBA. Number two, it's not like it's not media savvy on his part, right? Because when you as a professional basketball player put down another basketball player like that, or you put down a whole at times when you put down a whole era of basketball and the era that has preceded you and you coming after this era just shows that you are not it's just no, it's not a good look. And so he made himself look like a fool when he said that statement about Charles Barkley, and he made himself look like really, really, like unknowledgeable about the sport of basketball, the sport that he's been playing for for years and years and years, right? So what I want to do is I want to play Charles Barkley, like a response that Charles Barkley had to that, and then I want to react to what Charles Barkley said.
I wouldn't trade my career for Draymond's. I'm pretty sure Karl Malone wouldn't. I'm pretty sure Patrick Ewing wouldn't. But Draymond's had a really a terrific career. But to think he's on the same level with us as players, you'd have to be crazy to think that.
Just think about that. Draymond has 4 championship rings. Um, and Draymond probably going to go into the Hall of Fame. But the players that Charles, the players that Charles Barkley, like Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, um, man, those great basketball players, Draymond, nobody in their right mind, just like Charles Barkley said, Reggie Miller, like nobody in their right mind thinks that Draymond Green is on their level. And for him to have 4 championship rings and be going into one day into the Hall of Fame, just to me, just proves like how weak this era of basketball has been. That's just more proof that this era of basketball is just so weak. I think that when if Draymond Green had a played back in those days, if he was around back when Charles Barkley, he would not have been. He may not have even made the NBA because if you look at his skill set, like he don't do anything exceptional that would have been able to help a team out. Like he's undersized, number one, for the position that he played, power forward. Sometimes he plays center. You can only use him in today's era when you play small ball, right? And even sometimes today it's been proved that for certain matchups, he's just not, he's just too small, and unathletic, and he can't shoot. Even the guy, Austin Rivers, said the same thing. Like he just fell into the right place at the right time. I can't see him being. He's not like Dennis Rodman. Like he never averaged, I don't think he's ever averaged like double digit rebounds or double digit scoring or anything like that. Whereas though Dennis Rodman, for his career, averaged double digit rebounds, right? He's not the defensive player that Dennis Rodman was. So if he was back in the 80s or the 90s and the early 2000s, I can't see what role or how then he would have been able to help a team. He wouldn't have been able to play power forward because he's not big enough. Like when you think about power forwards, you talk about Kevin Willis, Terry Cummings, what's the Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley. Like he's not, and you put him next to those guys, he's not as big as those guys. He's not as strong as those guys. So you couldn't have put him at power forward. If you try to put him at small forward back in the day, he just wasn't athletic enough, and he wasn't a scoring threat like a lot of those small forwards was, back in the day. So he was fortunate enough to come into the league at this time and find his niche, right? And his niche was being able to help facilitate the offense for Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, and help to spread the floor. But in any other era, man, this guy would no way in the world he would have 4 rings, you know, not unless he was on the bench. There's no way he would have 4 rings unless he was on the bench. And every time he speak about basketball, just like I say, I think he just put his foot in his mouth. But Charles Barkley put him in his place, man. When Charles said, none of those guys, man, would trade careers. And I wouldn't blame him. Like the career that Reggie Miller had, I wasn't even a Reggie Miller fan, but Reggie Miller was a beast. Then Charles Barkley, I was a big Charles Barkley fan. Charles was a beast. Karl Malone was a beast. Patrick Ewing, I was a big Patrick Ewing fan, right? But no way in the world he could do with those great basketball players. They just played at a time where it was just the NBA was just so tough. It was good for the fans because of a lot of competition. And you had one guy who really dominated a tough league, man. Guy who Michael Jordan dominated a league that was just tough. If you could beat Karl Malone and Charles Barkley and Patrick Ewing and Reggie Miller, man, and keep those guys, it would just seem that like that era was so tough. It would seem that like one of those guys or a couple of those guys would have rings. Whereas though in this era, like, you got LeBron with 4 rings, you got Steph Curry with 4 rings, you got the Joker, you know what I mean? Like none of these players that play in this era right here was able to keep somebody else from getting a ring, whether it's 1 ring or 4 rings. Giannis got a ring, the Joker got a ring. What's the Shea Gilgeous has a ring, right? So this era right here to me, it's just not as hard as that era that Charles Barkley come from. And those guys, man, just put on night after night. They just put on a show for their teams and play hard and win all out. And it was just great basketball back then. Right now, this basketball, man, can't compare to what I watched when I was growing up, right? So Charles Barkley put Draymond in his place, man. The rings don't matter when it comes to this, man. Like to me, it really don't matter, man, because those guys was ballers. So that's my take on it. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And with that being said, man, I'll check you all out in the next video. Peace.